Well, as I mentioned in the program earlier about, these 2 planes up to China, it is always easy to spend someone else's money. And when you are spending someone else's money, the company's money or the government's money, you are far more liberal, far less nitpicky about how you spend that money because it's not yours and you don't lose out. When you're spending your money, you're interested in getting value for it. Therefore, I was not surprised in some ways, but when I looked at the figures, quite shocked at the growth in our public service, over the last, the term of this government, really. And a new study is out from the New Zealand Initiative, the lobby group think tank, the New Zealand Initiative, and its senior researcher, Dr Bryce Wilkinson, who joins us on the line now. Bryce, good to talk to you again. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, a pleasure to be here, Sean.
Look, I got to say, I kind of stopped in my tracks. I first just want the headlines of your study of the number of public servants or how much the public service has grown since 2017.
Yes, okay. So the increase is 10,685 people in the public service.
Sorry, 2,685?
10,000.
10,000. Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
What proportion? What's that as a percentage, Bryce?
That's 20.8%.
So the public service has grown by a fifth, by 20%. Wow.
Yeah, since 2018, and that's very significant. And the concern is that we don't seem to be getting better public service output. So we've still got big problems in the government-dominated areas of health and housing, social welfare, education, with literacy and truancies, problems in the universities, the tertiary education restructuring with the polytechs. There's nothing which looks particularly good, and yet we've had this big increase in the public service.
A fifth increase. What does that represent in dollar terms, Bryce, since 2018?
That's I've got that in the report. It's very significant in relation to total spending on personnel in the public service, but I don't have the figure.
Okay, I think maybe 429 million a year. Oh, no, this is managerial salaries. So we've got way more public servants. Can you think of a comparable industry that has had employee number growth like that in the same time period?
Well, the growth in the private sector as a whole has been much slower. It's only gone up by 5.9%, when the public service has gone up by 20%.
Okay, so the public service has grown at 4 times the rate of the private sector.
Yeah, roughly right.
4 times the rate. Okay, what are all these people? What are all these new public servants doing, Bryce?
Well, a lot of them, IT is one big increase, and that's probably a more focused answer to your question about the private sector. There's probably been strong growth in the private sector in IT.
Yeah.
There's been quite strong growth in the building sector, building and construction, but it will be slowing now. But the concern really, the big concern which comes through the papers about public sector bloat is the degree to which management and the PR and communications.
Well, the information specialists you've identified.
Yes, that's
$380 million more spent on information specialists between 2017 and 2022. And I can tell you, Bryce, as someone who tries to interact with government departments and bureaucracies and get information from them, they ain't specialists in providing it.
No, they always seem to take the maximum time and then too often ask for an extension and often turn it down or block things out on matters which don't really seem to warrant blocking it. So there's a widespread feeling, and has been commented on by many journalists, that the system has become unduly obstructive with these growth in numbers. Another concern, which I think is probably valid, is that these big comms teams take control of who within their organisations can speak to the media. So it's harder for the media, who's just got a technical question about the detailed technical aspects of some modelling of something, and just wants to speak to the expert in the department. But once you've got a big controlling comms team, they don't particularly want a journalist or outsider to speak to the departmental expert in case a bit of the wrong story gets out.
Mm. So you've published this research, Bryce, and I'm going to say the numbers I do think are staggering. What is your hope? What is the initiative suggestion? Well, firstly, I presume the initiative thinks this is a problem. This is not a good trend, these figures.
Definitely a problem. Definitely a concern about the quality of public policy and the need for the public service to...
We're running up to an election. Would you like to see some commitments from parties as to controlling spending in the public service or refocusing it?
Yeah, I think the public service needs attention, and a new administration needs to think hard about how to get the best people in the right places and give them the right instructions and the authority to implement them. But the bigger question is government spending overall, which the public service doesn't control. It's the government which does. And as I cite in my report, I think the Controller and Auditor General has done a fine public service in recent years in identifying specific cases where he thinks the attention to value for money and getting value from expenditure is utterly inadequate and letting the public down. So that's got to be tightened up. Another thing I think is when I did the research for this report, I found that in Asian countries there's real serious focus on what can be done to improve public sector productivity. And on some of the international research I cite, countries like Korea come out far, far better than New Zealand for getting good outputs from fewer public service inputs.
Bryce, could I ask, I've got a text through which I think is worthy of clarification. Are you talking about the public service or state services? Because public service excludes universities, polytechnics and other things. So are we talking about public servants in the purest term of the word or in the broadest possible term?
Yeah, good. That's a good question, and we do need to clarify that. So the 20.8% figure since 2018, it's 28% since 2017, that is the narrow public service.
Okay.
So that's, So let me put it into context. The total public sector is about 448,000 people.
Yep.
The public service is 62,000 people.
Right. Okay.
So the public service so for example, if we take education, the public service is the Ministry of Education. But all the government schools, the state schools are...
And what we're measuring here is not necessarily full-time staff, but full-time equivalents, because a lot of people, of course, and a lot of those comms people who are creaming it, mates of mine, are contracting, aren't they?
Yes, there's a lot of contracting going on, and we need better information on that. In the end of my report, I had to look to Australian figures to sort of get a quantification for how big the contracting was relative to the people who are actually on the books as public servants. And it was very significant. It was a very significant year.
We would expect, wouldn't we, with this massive increase in staffing and expenditure on staffing, a massive increase, a 20% increase in the efficiency and the responsiveness of our public service, wouldn't we?
Well, you would if it's all well directed, but and here, the public service has to do what the government tells it to do. So the outcomes which we observe are a combination of the quality of the government's policies plus the ability, the administrative ability and competence of the public service to actually implement those policies. So the outcomes we were observing are a function of two things. And my big criticism of this government is it doesn't seem to be successful at diagnosing the problem before it implements a solution. And all too often its solution seems to be that Wellington knows best. So the greater direction from Wellington and more spending from Wellington is what is needed. But that's just a failure to diagnose the problems properly in the first place.
Yeah, Bryce, I've got a text in from Mel. I just want to clarify this again. She says, these numbers don't include the temps and contractors working in government departments. I'm temping in one currently. It's a bloated staff doing F all. However, very luxurious offices in the Auckland CBD. These numbers do include temps and contractors. You've added them all up to make full-time equivalents, haven't you?
No. These numbers I'm citing at the moment this morning are headcount numbers. I do have equivalent full-time employees in the paper, but the ones I'm citing are headcount. And my understanding is they don't include the contractors.
Oh, wow. Wow. Look, I opened this interview, Bryce, by talking about how efficiently we spend money depends on whose money it is. And
oh, absolutely, yes. Milton Friedman said it beautifully. He said, when you're spending your own money on something that is going to benefit you, you take particular account of everything. When you're spending someone else's money on yourself, you don't really care how much you spend, but you do care about the benefit. And when you're spending someone else's money for the benefit of someone else, you don't really care about.
You don't give a stuff at all, which I guess is what the figures that you have, the initiatives come out with, are telling us, and that's what they're speaking to, a very inefficient spend of what at the end of the day is taxpayers' dollars, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what the Controller and Auditor General reports have been documenting, just not enough attention to value for money.
Yeah, and I guess it's that sort of attitude that says our plane might break down, let's send two.
Yeah, and it's got to come from the public. They've got to demand it. We get the politicians we vote for. So it's a matter of those people who feel this is really serious to act in the normal democratic way.
Yeah. Bryce, if people are interested in these figures, and they are really, I think they're gobsmacking, where can they go and find more details of your report and your research?
Right, the full report is on the New Zealand Initiative website. So if you just call that up, nzinitiative.org.nz.
Google will get you there without probably the dots as well. All right, and it's there and free to read.
Absolutely, yes. Yep, no charge.
Bryce, I'm still a little stunned, to be honest. And I was stunned when I read this stuff yesterday. I thank you very much indeed for coming on and sharing your research with us.
Yeah, they're important topics, and it's good to have quality public debate. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute to that.
Anytime, Bryce.
That's what it's all about.
Anytime, thank you. Dr Bryce Wilkinson from the... and Bryce, a very successful person in private business and finance. Do go onto the New Zealand Initiative website and read that stuff. It is just stunning. So 10,685 new public servants, that's just full-timers, it's not the temps and everything, since 2018. And do you feel a 20% increase? Do you feel like you're getting 20%? Or since 2018 you've had 20% better service from the government? I'm going to guess you're saying no.